Okay then, everybody. Don't adjust your sets. It is Roscoe hosting the main podcast. I've been allowed to host this one. Hope you're all doing well. It is a Blue Monday, unfortunately. Shout out to the other podcast that is called Blue Monday. Good name for a podcast. But yes, Town drew 1-1 with Plymouth on the weekend. We're going to go through it as a whole. I'm joined by good old Stuart Watson and Andy Warren, the main men of this podcast, the main kings. But I'm going to stop rambling. But we've got to shout out our sponsors. Manscaped, use the code KOA to get 20% off and free delivery. And Ginger Pickle. Ginger Pickle, of course, good old Tony Southgate. If you want to help with your Google ads and get into the top of Google, selling more products with your website remarketing, use Ginger Pickle. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get in Stu and Andy. Happy belated birthday to Stuart Watson. Stu, how you doing, my friend?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm good, thank you, Ross. It's nice to see you in the host chair.
Yeah, I do this too much, to be fair. Other podcasts, I think people are probably sick of me. But here we are, guys. Heathy, I wouldn't say he's angry. I think he's just very frustrated after the weekend. So he took the day off to just refresh himself, ready for the week ahead. So he'll be back. Do not worry, guys. It won't be me.
I imagine he's just in his garage doing a sort of a Rocky style montage, just beating up a punch bag, getting his frustrations out.
They did it again, didn't they? They did it again. They bottled it again. But no, 20 games to go, guys. 20 games to go. Anyway, though, let's bring in good old Andy Warren. Always a pleasure, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. Stu, what did you do for your birthday? Why wasn't I invited?
We see far too much of each other, mate. I had a nice birthday, thank you. A few family round yesterday. My wife did a top tier picky tea. Just put out a right spread. Got the old extender table out.
It's an extender.
It's an extender, yes. Yeah, covered with all sorts of a cheese board. It's great.
I like it. Hope you had a good one, though, my friend. Let's not beat around the bush, then, boys. Let's get right into it. It was a big game on the weekend against Plymouth. Packed out Portman Road. 1-1, the final score. We're going to go through it as a whole. Snap thoughts, though, Stu, on the day itself and the result.
Entertaining, deflating. It's probably the two words I would use to sum that game up. I thought disappointing that neither manager went for the great advert for League One cliche after that. But it was you couldn't take your eyes off of it. It was 100 miles an hour, had a real sort of almost derby feel to it. The whole 90 minutes flew by. The atmosphere, obviously, of the crowd was electric. And it would have been the perfect day had that game finished just a few minutes earlier. So close to the win. So changes the whole complexion of how we feel and how we're talking about this match. That goal going in at the end, doesn't it? Of course.
Yeah, Andy. It was all weathers as well. I think both you and me got very wet arriving to Portman Road. It decided to have a massive downfall of when we came. And I walked in the press room looking very wet. You had some wet hair as well. But yeah, snap thoughts on the day itself.
Yeah, it's just a proper occasion. And we've had a few of them at Ipswich of late, but they've been in short supply for so long. Just any game where the away fans are surrounded by stewards and police means it's a proper game. And that's what it was with Plymouth, a proper away crowd, which is something Ipswich doesn't get too often in terms of numbers in that size of ground. So that was great. Chaos for large parts of it, mistakes, some brilliant moments, hearts in mouths, heads in hands, had a little bit of everything, but just not ultimately the final result that we all wanted and thought we were going to get.
Yeah, and still, let's talk about team news. Always a fun thing to talk about. Everyone always debates on that. What's your thoughts on the team news? No Nathan Broadhead, new signing, but George Hurst was on the bench, but yeah.
Yeah, in our various chats building up to this game, I think we said that there was only one real question mark in our minds in that starting 11, and that was whether it would be the team that started the Oxford win on Boxing Day and also the Portsmouth game. that followed, or whether it would be Nathan Broadhead coming in for Marcus Harness. That's what we debated. In the end, it was the Oxford game, and there was no Broadhead in the squad at all. So that was a real disappointment. I can see the logic that if he's been travelling to and from, I think we do forget the human element of players signing for new clubs. Anyone who's changed jobs and moved across the country for a new job, you're relocating. I don't know what his family situation is, whether it's just him or what, but either way, you're going to and from the country. You're trying to move house, find a flat. Yes, the club will do a lot of stuff on that side of things, but you also got nerves of meeting new colleagues, trying to impress, all that sort of stuff. And the vibe was that, they just didn't felt. And this is a player that's got a little bit of an injury history behind him. If he's saying that he's got a bit of muscle tightness, and I know people have jumped on Kieran's comments about he's in a new bed and that's not helped and stuff like that. But these are elite level athletes. I know people might roll their eyes at that and say it's League One, but these are top athletes whose things like that do make a difference. So imagine how everyone would have felt today if they'd have taken the risk on him and he'd have broken down, and the fallout from that. So it was disappointing that he wasn't involved. You wonder if some of the substitutions in this game that we might come onto in a bit would have panned out differently. If we wouldn't have necessarily seen Sam Morsey playing as a number 10 later in this game had Broadhead been available. But from how it's been described, I think that's probably sensible to tread carefully with him.
It's like Kieran McKenna said after the game, isn't it? He's a short, medium, and long-term signing for the club. It's not just about the big game with Plymouth. If it wasn't that big game with Plymouth, it might have felt a little bit different for him not to have been involved. If it was a more kind of mundane game, it might have not felt like such a big thing before kickoff potentially, but it was, and it did feel big. But ultimately, yeah, the right call. I'm sure we'll see him at Oxford. Yeah,
of course. The running joke is next time we get a new bed, boys, we're taking a day off, aren't we? If we're getting a new bed or stuff like that, we're going to do that. That's not funny. I'm sorry, guys. Let's talk about some of the big moments before Wes Burns' opening goal, because Plymouth had a few chances. We had a few chances. And Stu, there's a big chance for Plymouth, of course, in the first half.
Yeah, the first half was, I used the word frenzied in some of my reports. It was, I think both clubs, Andy said this in our post-match video, that almost sort of threw their usual game plans out the window a little bit because of the high stakes of this match. I'm sure Plymouth don't go long that often that they normally do. That they went long with goal kicks. McKenna talked about them being willing to smash it up to Hardy and Ennis in their team. And Ipswich just didn't have that usual time on the ball. How often, 9 times out of 10, Ipswich at Portman Road are so used to teams being deep, playing with a low block. They have to sort of be patient and probe and work the ball. And all of a sudden, Plymouth were right in their faces. Credit to them. That was a real high-intensity press from them, no more so from their 2 central midfielders, Matete and Randall, who I thought took some real risks. They were right up high, and Matete was kind of almost man-marking Evans, trying to stop him, sort of picking it up off the defence and spraying those passes. So it was very cat and mouse. It was risk versus reward. Plymouth took some risks with that man-to-man marking. Ipswich, I think, quite quickly worked out that they had to play over the top of them to try and sort of beat that press, and they were doing that. They were finding Freddie Ladapo's chest. They were finding his feet. He was looking strong, holding the ball up. It was just a very watchable first half. You had the referee booking Burns, then not booking and giving some fouls the other way. There was some frustration over that sort of consistency, but just a really frenetic, frenzied first half that there was nothing between those two sides. Davis and Burns both had to make big blocks at one end. Ladapo really should have squared the ball to Burns at the other. But yeah, as Andy just said, we hope this would be a proper football match, a proper occasion. And even though it was 0-0 at half time, you knew that this was a real game on our hands.
Definitely, and Andy, there's a few times where Walton, because they were doing such a high press, weren't they, Plymouth, and Walton, some back passes to him. There's a few little oh my god moments, but yeah, you gotta get there in that sort of game.
Yeah, you are. Christian Walton's taken a fair amount of heat in the aftermath of this game. I think some of it deserved, some of it not. Goalkeeping wise, I thought he was absolutely fine at the weekend. He kept goal well, couldn't do anything about the goal that went in at the end, deflected up into the top corner. But yes, he could have kicked better, but Ipswich put him in that situation, and Plymouth put him in that situation as well. It's difficult. You have mixed feelings about watching League One teams play out from the back. It's high risk, high reward. I think he played some nice balls, kind of sort of caressed some balls kind of into the middle of the pitch to try and find Ladapo at times, which worked really well for Town. But under pressure, yeah, there were some issues. It wasn't just him; it was Donatian as well. Had a few issues with back passes. That the one in the second half, very very nearly, it did get charged down and didn't go too far wide of the goal. But while I'm sure he'll come away thinking he could have kicked better in that game, I think some of the heat he's got as an individual is maybe a little bit undeserved, if I'm honest.
I agree with that. Do you agree with that, Stu? I know it was the battle of the two Plymouth boys. Michael Cooper, really good goalkeeper for Plymouth, and Christian Walton came through their youth academy as well. But you got a little bit of flack on the weekend.
Several times he just put the ball straight through to his opposite number, didn't he? And maybe it's because he's just not used to kicking long. Every week he's playing it short. It was a bit alien to him, and yeah, his kicking was off. There's no doubt about it. I think it's probably in context of the fact that his own lofty standards have just maybe slipped in general over the last little while. But no. It was fine from a shot stopping and catching point of view and things like that, but the kicking was off for Ipswich, and in a game where they needed to probably find the striker and play off of him, that was always going to be a big out ball. That fell below those standards with his kicking for sure.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about the man who is here for the big moments. Scored the winner against Portsmouth at Portland Road. Scored the winner against Derby live on TV. And it opened the scoring in this game. Wes Burns, good little finish from him. But yeah, as a great moment, great atmosphere. Stu, good goal from Wes Burns.
It was, and before we get to that moment, we had the crossbar rattled at both ends at 0-0 at the start of the second half. Really big chance for Marcus Harness. Really clever ball between two defenders from Davis, picked out Harness, and he was in acres of space, 10 yards of space inside the penalty box. It's not a sitter. I don't know if it's quite in gilt-edged chance. I think it probably is for a player that he's in the team for those moments. Marcus Harness, we've talked again about the risk versus reward of him in the team. The risk is that he can turn over the ball sometimes. He can give it away and get a little bit loose. But the reward is that you put your money on him in those moments to be the sharp shooter in the box, touch, bang, out the feet. And we've seen him do it earlier in the season, but it hits the crossbar. And that was in these games where those sort of chances were always going to be at a premium. The first goal it felt was going to be big. That was a big moment for him to hit the crossbar from in the box there.
Yeah, he needs to hit the target from there and work the goalkeeper. The amount of space and time that he had, he obviously is very well struck. Of course, it was very well struck. You see how far it flew off the crossbar, but that needed to work the goalkeeper properly at the very least, I think. But it's not. What happened a few minutes later is a completely different league to this chance, though. Ryan Hardy won't want to see that again, and he's very fortunate that the Bali Mumba bailed him out at the end, because I think he would have encountered a very different Stephen Schumacher at the end of the game had he not, because to miss from there, I'm going to get all nostalgic here. It reminds me of a shot that a Torpedo Moscow player missed against Ipswich in the UEFA Cup 20 years ago. Quite similar. I'll show you that later, Stu. Have you ever seen that before? I'll find it for you. It's similar. Similar in Moscow. Made me think of Marlon Harewood, which is the benchmark for terrible Portman Road misses for me forever. I think not as bad as that. This one from Hardy, but to hit the bar from 6 yards out is with half a goal to put it in is dreadful from a really good striker as well. So he'll be feeling fortunate.
Having watched it back in his very slight
Come
defense,
on, don't
the
do
ball
it.
is slightly behind him, and he has to kind of just has to slow his run. I think he's coming attacking the ball a bit quicker than the ball is coming at him, and for that reason he's kind of put his foot behind him, and that's made the ball pop up a little bit. But yeah, that was a sitter. There was a collective cry of disbelief around Portman Road, and that was a major let-off. And then when you have a major let-off like that, and then you go and get the breakthrough, not long afterwards, you start to think, yeah, is this gonna be our day?
It's like it's like the phrase, my nan could have scored it. My nan Doreen probably would have scored that goal. So
we've discussed this. If you remember a few months back, we talked about could have played all day and not scored. Yeah. And we discussed whether maybe football could introduce that as an actual rule, where a manager once a season gets to play his cliche card, and the two teams do indeed have to play till midnight and see if someone scores. Maybe my nan could have scored that is also a card that could have been played. Stephen Schumacher stops the game, puts his hand up, and brings on his nan, or maybe there has to be some sort of designated nan. I don't know how it would work, but that just throwing it out there, that could liven up the game.
Ipswich have obviously given Ed Sheeran the number 17 shirt in their squad. Like maybe every squad you need to every squad has a nan in it. A designated nan, and maybe you're looking for the youngest nan available. They have to be a nan of a player or manager.
There have to be some rules involved here, wouldn't there? Otherwise, people might be pushing it. I mean, if it is based purely on the manager, Kieran McKenna's youth is hopefully going to play into his hands. And look, I don't.
You don't know his nan situation.
Well, we don't know the nan situation. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
But look, there needs to be some more thought put into this. She has her age as the squad number as well. Is she sitting on the bench like in a full kit as well for every game, just waiting for that one moment?
Well, she'll need to be warm. You have to be warm because like it's a big moment. They'd have to be warmed up at all. Maybe they cut under a blanket, just staying warm.
They go down the touchline with a little Zimmer frame and get the warm applause when the subs go out for their first warm up in the second half.
If it's a nan with a Zimmer frame, that's a worrying sign. I'd want a nan a bit more mobile. A mobile nan would be the one that I'd look for. Maybe you promote maybe it's an opportunity for like the best teenager in the squad, like Cameron Humphrey's nan, for example. Logic suggests that Cameron Humphrey's nan might be a cracking.
Okay, so it can be any
age.
player in the 18. So it's encouraging managers to make sure they put young players in their squad because it's
I've told you this before. 30-year-olds get out of the squad. You know, that's what I mean. You know, that's back a few. You know, last season saying 30-year-olds. Oh no, so that's where this comes into play.
Can we workshop this further, please? Because I've got some questions, right? Because obviously Ryan Hardy has just missed an absolute sitter. So Schumacher now Schumacher's got the chance here to right that wrong. Does the whole thing just get recreated? Niall Ennis has to get away down the...
it's like snooker where the referee has to kind of re-spot the ball from where the cross came in. And and then they recreate the situation, but replacing Ryan Hardy with said nan. And if she scores, they get the goal. I don't know what the jeopardy would be. If she misses, that's it. It just remains the same.
And that's the nan season over at that point. If she's missed,
you can only play that card once in a season.
Can you imagine the roar of the crowd if Nan scored?
Knee slide.
broken hip. But imagine if Nan put the ball in the net, and there'd be a scenario eventually where Nan would win promotion for somebody or win a cup final. Nan would be amazing.
Imagine an Aguero moment.
Oh,
Nan.
yeah. Big up all the Nans out there.
Nans,
If you're a Nan, listen to this podcast. Hope you have a good day. But yeah,
Nan trials. They'd have to hold Nan trials. This Nan chat's gone on too long. That was a great diversion, though. Brian Hardy missed a sitter. It was still 0-0, and then Wes Burns went and scored.
Yeah, I think Wes Burns' Nan's probably pretty good as well. We don't know his situation, but enough of that. Anyway, boys. Well, Andy, great goal.
You tried to get us away from the Nan chat, Ross, and you've dragged us back to it immediately. Wes Burns did a goal to put Ipswich ahead.
Yeah, no Nan was required here because it was a thumping shot from Wes Burns that just beat an incredibly good goalkeeper for power into the top corner. Just beat him for power.
Thumping, and thunderous, lashed on the angle, but the best part of that goal was the touch from Luke Wolfenden. That's a deft.
It was, and he knew it as well because the rest of the team all ran off with Wes Burns to that north stand, Cobbo stand corner. Luke Wolfenden went the other way, and very pleased with his work, and so he should be. I think he played well in general, but that touch was really beautiful, cushioned. He ran all the way round the other way, round the back of the goal, and lapped up a little bit himself. Like that must have been an incredible experience for those players to hear that roar as that ball went in. I'd love to experience that. I think that's the thing that I'm most envious of these football players, getting to just be at the centre, the target of that noise and that outpouring of relief, joy, whatever emotion it is. It's great. I love the footage the club got of the celebration, kind of Wes Burns one by one going through his little rituals that he has with all of his mates, like ending, no twerking this time. He hasn't done that for a while, but just ended after all the hype and all of the outpouring of emotions. It just ends with and really calm, that nice little handshake that him and Janoy do. Just to the gentleman, two little gentlemen shaking hands at the end of a really big moment. That was really nice.
Connor Chaplin reminding him to do the ear cup to start with, and then you're right, and then eventually it all dies down.
Janoy's waiting. He's waiting. He knows he doesn't need to rush. There's no need to rush that handshake. Let everyone else do all of that, and then little handshake to finish. Love it. It's just a shame it didn't prove to be the winner, isn't it?
Yeah, I was about to say that. In the end, didn't matter because Plymouth equalised. Do you want to cover
it did matter. It does matter.
It did. Yeah, we got a point still, and it was great. Yeah,
it needed to be scored. It did matter. Yeah, but before we get to the Plymouth equaliser, there's a fair amount happened, didn't it? Kieran McKenna's talking. Ipswich led for half an hour. Kieran McKenna's talking about Plymouth not necessarily kind of battering the door down, which I would agree with, but they did grow into it, and Ipswich, things broke down a bit for Ipswich, didn't it? Wes Burns went off with a knock, which doesn't sound like it's anything to worry about at all, but it all meant a bit of a reshuffle, and ultimately the game ended with George Hurst up top. We should probably talk about him in a moment, but George Hurst up top with a three of Sam Morsey on the left, Connor Chaplin and Kane Vincent-Young as the attacking three behind George Hurst, which isn't really what we were expecting, and I doubt we'll ever see that again from Ipswich.
No, all that talk we had about what's the bench going to be and the attacking options, no one would have predicted that to be the finishing attack. There's been a lot of chat about substitutions, and I don't know how I feel about it because it's always easy to be smart with hindsight. Ladapo and Harness are the first two to come off on 67, not long after the goal. On comes Hurst, and on comes Humphreys. And interestingly, it's Humphreys who goes and sits in that deeper role alongside Lee Evans, and Morsey goes to play as that inside left forward. I thought Ladapo had a really good game. I want to take the chance to give him a shout out. Yes, he had a couple of sort of greedy moments in the final third. Maybe could have shown a bit more awareness, but he looked like someone who had a bit between his teeth. I thought he was strong. I thought he gave their centre halves a real handful for them. Held it up. Really emptied himself into that game, and in the end, probably just it was important to sort of freshen that up, especially when you got Hurst on the bench.
I completely agree with what you said about Ladapo, particularly in the first half. I thought he was the best Ipswich player in the first half, but had a really interesting reaction, as there always is, to some player ratings after this game, and his was the one that got the most attention out of all of that. Like a lot of people would describe him as horrendous, awful. I didn't think that at all. I think he obviously had that big moment in the first half that we've discussed where he absolutely should have had his head up and thread Burns away. But his kind of persistence, ultimately, he had a shot block behind that won the corner that led to Burns' goal. And he worked really hard up front. I think he gets an unnecessary amount of critique, I think. And we discussed him at length recently, but I thought he had a good game, and I enjoyed watching Hurst when he came on as well. It didn't always bounce his way, the ball. He looked like he was making his debut, like as players can do sometimes. A lot of effort, a lot of running. But what I liked most about him is, while it didn't necessarily happen for him in terms of the ball bouncing the right way for him, he just looks like he's going to fit what McKenna wants. You just look at him and the way he moves, I think McKenna likes. They clearly like him. They know this player inside out. They've wanted him for a year, and they've got him.
Nearly set up a goal within sort of moments of coming on, didn't he? Where he ran the sort of left side of the box and cut it back from Morsey, who didn't really get hold of the shot and sort of dragged it a little bit, and Cooper had to turn it around the post. But very early days on him. Again, we talked about the Broadhead first week, meeting your new teammates. He's not played a huge amount of football in the first half of the season, so he's going to be a little bit rusty in terms of match sharpness. So for all of those factors considered, and where the game was at and the emotion surrounding it, that was an encouraging little first glimpse of George Hurst, I thought.
Yeah, they've got two strikers there that I think will dovetail. I don't think they're going to be on the pitch at the same time very often at all. But I think they've got two players there that should provide something for Town during the final 20 games here. I think what they need. I'd like Ladapo to be a better impact sub. I think he's a better starter of a game at the moment. I think he's much better when he starts games. I think he feels that love a bit more. I think he feeds off the pre-match atmosphere and everything. He looks like he starts games really well. I'd love to see him come off the bench and be a real impact as well, because he'll have to do that at times too. They're going to have to dovetail nicely.
Yeah, I thought the Dav had a good game. And do you think because he's a striker, he will just get that more, criticism and stuff like that? George Hurst is a big boy, isn't he? He's a big boy. We knew he was a big boy, but seeing it up close and personal, he was a big boy.
He's big boy, but he's
skinny as well.
Athletic as well. Like he's
mobile.
He can move, and I think he's got a little bit of everything. So, I think they'll be okay.
So what's the logic behind Sam Morsey playing higher up and Humphreys deeper there? Is that, if I'm trying to put my McKenna hat on, I'm thinking we're ahead. It's a hurly-burly game. It's frantic. It's frenetic. Cameron Humphreys may only be 19, but we've seen enough evidence that he's got an old head on young shoulders. He's someone who can receive it in tight situations, who can make intelligent, calm decisions when games are getting hot like that. And they obviously felt that he trusted him to go and be in that sort of where they were pressing high on him. He was someone that might be able to kind of alleviate that press. I didn't think Sam Morsey was his usual self in this game. He had a couple of those moments where he played a 1-2 and sort of surged through the heart of the pitch, but a little bit off colour, again, by his own lofty standards. But you can't be taking your captain off in this sort of scenario. So maybe that was the compromise option there. For me personally, and this is not trying to be smart in hindsight, because I said this during the game. I think I've put it into words in the live blog and stuff, and I certainly said it to you, that I felt like James Wilson was on a booking. I thought Dan Scarr was looking like he had an awkward time when the ball was put in behind him and they were getting one-on-one with him. I'd have liked to have seen Caden Jackson's pace up against someone like that, give something to. We'd seen that Ipswich's out ball was to play over the press, and maybe sort of Jackson might have been able to do something in that sort of inside left role.
Yeah, it's at the same time, like the other when Burns went off, the change was to bring Vincent Young on, which is obviously we've talked about Caden being a Wes Burns kind of dovetailer over there as well, and that was interesting as well, that whichever way you dress it up, as much as Kane is good on the ball, can play a bit higher, it's a more defensive option, isn't it? It was just quite defensive. If they had seen the game out, you'd talk about that as being excellent game management. The fact they didn't means you don't. But the Morsey one, I don't know. I can kind of square that off in a couple of different ways. Was it to try and protect Davis and that left flank a little bit more, possibly? I don't think he always gets the most protection down the left, Davis, and he doesn't offer himself the most protection either, because he's a gung-ho flying left back. So maybe it was a bit of that. I also thought I thought Morsey played quite well, actually. I enjoyed watching him in this game, but I think he emptied himself. I think he was knackered. So was it more of a, you wanted to freshen up, like you've kind of hinted at, you wanted to freshen up that engine room, and probably he would have been the one you'd take off because he was knackered, but you didn't want to do that, take your captain off, which they ultimately did. Eventually he did come off, but you wanted to kind of take him out of the real heart of this game as well. I don't know. We don't know the logic behind it, but it was unusual, and I'm not sure we'll see it again.
The Vincent Young one is obviously enforced, like you say. Burns coming off. We're at the 84th minute by that stage when he eventually comes off. Yeah, and then you've got a straight choice. Do you bring on Vincent Young, who's more of a fullback, to play in that sort of faux wing-back role, or do you bring on Caden Jackson, who's played there before? He went with Vincent Young, and I think as the game reached the 90th minute, they got naturally deeper, and I think Vincent, at one stage, I think I said to you, they're getting deep here, and it was a proper back five. Both the sort of the wide forward guys had dropped in, and it become a back five, and it had just started to get a little bit nervy, a little bit edgy, and they just started to invite some pressure, which was a shame, because you alluded to it there. McKenna said it's not like Plymouth were banging the door down. There wasn't a barrage of shots and crosses, and I thought they managed the game pretty well after going 1-0 up. And it's just when that match hit, then the 9 minutes of stoppage time went up, it just started to get a little bit deep and nervy and edgy, and the crowd, you'd sense it. The ooh goes up when the 9 minutes comes on, and just invited that pressure on the edge of their box a little bit. And obviously there's some misfortune with the deflection to take the ball into the top corner. It's shades of Fleetwood again, with Burgess being the man that the ball deflects off of and loops into the top corner. But could Ipswich have done more to prevent that situation? Could they have been a little bit braver not to have got so deep? I don't know.
And we never will. We never will, sadly. But if you are talking about inviting danger, the goal is a good example of that, isn't it? Just how close to the edge of the Plymouth box, the Ipswich box, Plymouth were able to get and work the ball. A good ball from Azaz, Mumba inside. Humphreys maybe sitting off a little bit, and he's got quite a lot of space to get the shot out. I don't think you can necessarily put any blame on. You can't put blame on Burgess for it. He did all he could. Could he have done more if he was a yard higher up the pitch? Maybe. But yeah, it's ended the way it has.
McKenna talked about they'll look at the fine details of it. Could they get down the line of the shot in a more effective way that stops it? Could loads of little things that they'll pick through, but sometimes it's easy because, what if Cameron Humphreys then just sort of clatters into him in the edge of the box and then they get a free kick and then someone sticks the free kick in and you go, oh, that's terrible ill discipline. So you can always pick it apart afterwards and be smart. I thought it was a good pass. I thought it was a good run, and I thought it was, obviously did good finish, aided by a deflection as well. But in isolation, if Ipswich were going along quite nicely, you could swallow all of this much easier. But it's the fact it's against the backdrop of last-minute goals and points dropped that I think is giving everyone just as the jitters are just starting to bubble up again. The Rotherham game kind of put a lid on those after some frustrating Christmas results. But this is Ipswich Town. This is a decade of false dawns and frustrations. And as I've tried to tell so many people at the club that are maybe a bit more new to Ipswich Town, that there's years of some frustrations and disappointments always just simmering under the surface, and understandably so.
Yeah, it had to be him, didn't it? Bulu Mumba, who went down a good game. Of course, there's a few little chants from Town fans to him about, being a Norwich, low knee. But it had to be him scoring the goal. And that atmosphere just went flat, didn't it? And I just couldn't believe there's 29,000 people. Of course, a lot of people were leaving at that stage. But yeah, it had to be him. Boys, let's sort of round off this chat at the Plymouth game then. A draw, the right result? What do you reckon, Andy?
Yeah, yeah, probably. But a draw never feels like the right result when you're leading a game into stoppage time. It can't feel like that, and that's why both sets of fans, not also factoring in kind of their respective positions in the table as well. But Ipswich fans would have gone home feeling like they'd lost. Plymouth fans went home feeling like they'd won. But I think on balance, yeah, it was a sort of a hammer and tong League One football match between two of the best teams in the league, that you couldn't really split them. Neither team were at their best, but I think the occasion and the day dictated that was probably never going to be the case. I think maybe expecting these teams to be at their peak levels, both of them at the same time going against each other, is maybe an unrealistic expectation. This was what it should have been. And yeah, I'd say on balance, yeah, a draw was probably right, but there's one team that will be happier with that than the other.
Yeah, Stu, Town fans, after speaking with me after the game, just gutting was the word. Just couldn't believe it. Another game, we can see it late on, another, 3 points dropped. But overall, draw, the right result?
Yeah, it was over the course of the 99 minutes or whatever we got in the end. I don't think you could argue that a draw was the correct reflection of that. McKenna said, yeah, we can't have too many complaints with that. But yeah, you can't be. There's no solace in that, is there? When you've come so close, and it's in another example of that. And you look at it. I said after the Rotherham game, I thought that might be a little bit of I was not sweeping the Portsmouth and Lincoln results and performances under the rug, but I kind of thought a lot of illness in the camp. Caveat to that, Oxford was the real Ipswich Town on Boxing Day before that illness really came in. And, if this was Ipswich's blip, then they were laughing. But now this sort of puts a different complexion on it. I looked at it, last 10 games, Ipswich are 9th in the form table, 1-3, drawn 6, lost 1. And that start of that 10-game run is Charlton. And you start to wonder if the events of that day in stoppage time, how big a sort of psychological blow that afternoon was for Ipswich Town to have been 4-2 up in stoppage time. And whether that's now become a bit of a thing for Ipswich, whether it is starting to become a bit of a mental block going into late in games. It's 15 points dropped from winning positions, which is starting to mount up a little bit now, and we'll come on to kind of what's required over these last 20 games. But it's looking nip and tuck now for top two, and you're just starting to worry that some of these missed opportunities and points left out there might just look back on the final day and rue one or too many of those.
Whether it's becoming a mental block for the players or not, what you can't argue is that you can feel it in the stadium, can't you? There's no kind of, I don't think any team is ever really comfortable taking a 1-goal lead into stoppage time. I don't think any stadium in the world is going to ever feel kind of like free and easy. This is fine. But when you do have a bit of a history of it in recent times, and a ball goes into the box in stoppage time, there's naturally in the stadium, you can feel it, an edge. And every time it happens, that edge gets more and more. And it's a bit of a vicious cycle, really, because you can't not feel like that, even with the best will in the world. So I don't know. It's each and every one has its own individual circumstance, doesn't it? Every game is different. Every half is different, but they are adding up. And we started off talking about it was one of those days. It's one of a lot of days.
The points drop thing does require a little bit of context in that if you're a team that takes the lead a lot, the teams that are at the top of a table are going to be open to dropping more points from winning positions because they're going to be in winning positions more often than most. I think Ipswich have scored the game's first goal 20 times in their, what are they at now, 26 games into the season, and they've broken the deadlock in 20 of those, which is more than anybody. So that does leave you open to dropping more points when you get ahead. Plymouth, for context, have dropped 11 points from winning positions this season, which is only 4 less than Ipswich. So it's maybe not as bad as it first sounds when you say 15 points dropped from winning positions. That sounds horrendous out loud. And it only have taken 1 or 2 of these situations to have turned the other way. And there has been some misfortune with deflections and things. Sometimes Ipswich haven't dealt with high balls into the box when you talk about Charlton and other games, and they could have done better. Fleetwood, this one, shot from the edge of the box, deflection. As McKenna said, a football ultimately, for all the work they put into it, is a game of chaos and misfortune and deflections. I can't remember the exact phrase that he used. A game of chance.
Yeah, like is it a low-scoring game defined by something?
He's come back to you on that
words.
one.
He's better at finding words than us.
But you get the point. So yeah, this is where Ipswich find themselves out with 20 games to go now. Is it a 3-way race for the top 2? There's 1 or 2 sort of on the rails that might have something to say about it, but it's increasingly looking, I think now we know it's gonna probably go down to the wire. It's certainly how it's looking to me.
It should do. You can talk about all the fine margin moments, and the hope's got to be that during these final 20 games, Ipswich can find a way to be on the right end of those fine margins a little bit more often, because if they can, they're in all of these games. Like if you just look at the rest of the top 6, it's taken 3. Town have conceded three times against Plymouth. Mumba's on Saturday was the closest range of all of those from the edge of the box. They've taken the lead twice against them in 2 really even matches. Sheffield Wednesday, they only drew at Hillsborough because Michael Smith's offside goal was allowed to stand. They beat Derby at Portman Road. They should have beaten Bolton on the opening day. Sam Morsey had a really gilt-edged chance to win that on the opening day, and they would have beaten Barnsley were it not for Marcus Harness having a goal wrongly ruled out. All of those real fine margins there. Imagine what the table would look like if those fine margins had gone Town's way. More often than not, they're finding themselves on the wrong end of the fine margins. If they can just tweak that slightly to get on the right end of them, things would look so much brighter. Easier said than done. But
if I was playing devil's advocate here, you'd then say ifs, buts, maybes, coulda, woulda, shoulda. That's quite a long list of, but if that had happened and if that had happened, and all of those things you say are absolutely legitimate, and I can't argue against that at all. But it comes back to these big occasions for Ipswich Town. The big statement moments are not happening quite enough. Yes, derbies happen. Yes, they've beaten Peterborough and Portsmouth this season. The shine has been taken off those results a little bit with the way those two have dropped away massively. Then you're going back to last season. It's Wickham in McKenna's first game. It was Plymouth on Paul Mariner Day. But the record against Ipswich, ever since Ipswich have dropped into League One, their record against the teams that have finished above them has not been good enough. And you could argue that even since McKenna's taken over, yes, it's improved, but has it improved enough for Ipswich to be a top two finisher? We're talking about higher standards that we're holding Ipswich Town to now. And they're just not quite coming out the right side of these big games enough times at the moment.
Yeah, if you get to the end of the season and you're still trotting out a woulda, coulda, shoulda, that's completely valid at the end of the season. But there's still 20 games left to get on the right side of that now. There's time to you can't look back, of course you can't, but what you can do is look forward. And in all of those fine margins games, you can make a real argument as to why Ipswich should have achieved what they wanted to achieve. And I'd argue that they are capable of doing that. And so with 20 games left, that's why, for me, I'm able to feel quite positive about that, because I trust Kieran McKenna. I think him and his players have earned the trust. They've shown us how they can improve within a year. They were 11th on this date a year ago, obviously under Paul Cook for the majority of the time before this. They were 11th a year ago. They're 20 points better off, and a lot of positions in the table better off now. They've shown improvement over that year, and I trust McKenna and the players to show an improvement in these final 20 games, particularly when you factor in George Hurst coming into the team properly, the Broadhead coming into the team properly. I would back them to find a way to mean that in these 20 games, you can get rid of the woulda, coulda, shoulda arguments from the previous ones, because all it needs is for them to improve from draws to wins. We're not talking about coming from being well beaten in these games to having to suddenly dominate teams and beat them. They need to find an edge, a fine margins edge, and I trust them to do it. I really do. And there's a long way left to go.
I'm staying positive, boys, because I don't want the playoffs. No one wants the playoffs. With our history in that, playoffs, we don't want it, do we? So keep the faith, everybody. It is a Blue Monday, but as Andy said there and Stu said, a lot of other positive stuff to talk about. Let's talk about special mention to Marcus Stuart. Great to see him back at Portman Road. Great to see him at half-time. Town fans chanting his name throughout. Andy, a player that I know you loved watching when you were a young lad. But yeah, great to see him back.
Yeah, it was. Obviously some other circumstances around Marcus at the moment with his illness, but he appears to be battling that, fighting that head on. Really positive guy, and just great to hear from him at halftime. I've never known, I'll be honest, a lot of the halftime interviews that you get at Portman Road, they're filling a bit of time, aren't they? They're like, and here he is, everybody, and most people have gone in to get a drink or chatting amongst themselves, looking at the other scores. But Portman Road was silent for this. It fell to listen to what he had to say to Simon Milton, and everybody largely seemed to stay in their seats and listen. So a lot of people ready to show a lot of love to Marcus, and I know I'm sure that he and his family felt that massively.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Let's are we all done now, Plymouth? We've spoken that throughout. Are we happy, Stu? Any other business from the game?
I mean, it's more looking ahead now. I've started to have a look at kind of the last 20 now on what may be required. This is the stage of the season now where I turn to a website called Sports Club Stats, which is kind of one of those supercomputer type websites that feeds in all of the results and possibilities and probabilities and gives you an idea of what may be required during the run-in. And I guess now we are kind of coming into the run-in. 20 games feels like a nice whole number, and we're over the halfway point. And what may be required for Ipswich Town to finish in the top three? I guess at the moment, some of the worry is tinged by the fact that Sheffield Wednesday are in such a good run of form, 5 straight wins in the league. You have to ask whether they're just having their purple patch, and I'm sure there'll be some humps in the road for them. I think as football fans, we just assume that the other teams that we're up against are just going to be brilliant and they'll keep on doing it, and they don't drop points in any scenario. Where I've outlined, Plymouth have dropped points. Sheffield Wednesday have had frustrating results. It's not going to be all plain sailing for those two along the way. If we go worst case scenario, and I go back to, I was looking at what the highest points total has been required to finish second. You're going back to when Wigan and Blackburn were the sort of standout top two in 2017, 2018, and 96 was what was required to finish in second. I mean, that's high. That's a high total, but let's put that as the kind of worst case scenario yardstick. Ipswich need 45 more points from their last 20 games. And I think they took 41 from their first 20 games of this season. So that's not a million miles away. That's a couple of results, just a couple of draws turning the other way, which could easily happen. I'm with Andy. I'm still feeling quite confident about this. I think Ipswich have been pretty consistent. They just need, what they do need is just a bit of momentum. Just at some stage, just the snowball to start to gather a bit of pace and string a few results together and just get that feel-good factor really pumping again. Ideally, going into that Sheffield Wednesday game at Portman Road next month, if they can get something going in these next few games heading into that one, that would be ideal.
It's going to be fairly high, isn't it? You're probably right. It's probably not going to reach that 96 barrier, but it's going to be 90 plus, 93, 94. It's going to be something high, I think, this year required. So they are going to have to sort of do what you've laid out there, Stu. It's not this isn't going to be an 88, 90 point job for second place. I wouldn't suggest.
45 more points is to lay that out is 14 wins, 3 draws and 3 defeats. So they've only lost 3 games. Is it 3 games so far?
Yeah, 3 in 26.
So yeah, the defeats part of it, you wouldn't be too worried about. It's just only 3 draws there. It's turning a few of these draws into more wins. That's what we're talking about. It's
a simple mission. Well, simple in words mission, isn't it? Turn a few draws into wins, fine margins, and I think that's what will decide where Ipswich finish the season.
Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday v Plymouth the weekend before Ipswich host Sheffield Wednesday. So that's a massive 8 days for Sheffield Wednesday coming up in February. I'm just already starting to look at the Ipswich fixtures, seeing what is that a little spell there where they look okay on paper. That could be 3, 4, 5 wins in a row, and then I look at March, April, and I see Ipswich have got Bolton away, Barnsley away, Derby away, all in the space of a few weeks, and you think that's crunch time there. I get it. I get that people are feeling a bit nervy. We've waited a long time for Ipswich to be in a hunt like this, but we've also got to be excited as well. We've got to be excited. We've got the Hurst and Broadhead factor, as you say. McKenna has shown that he can improve squads window to window. If he can take them to another level, and we're not talking about 2, 3, 4 levels of improvement. We're just talking about just going that one step further, and maybe they've got some players in that are going to enable them to do that.
And do you think that some luck will come Town's way as well? Because I felt like this season we hadn't had that luck yet, like coming off someone's arse or getting a right decision. Of course, we had a few penalties, but not that much. Do you think that's hopefully going to come? I know some Town fans were mentioning that, like, surely Townsley get some luck this season now, because we haven't had it yet. There's other clubs who are getting deflections. Plymouth, 3 of their goals have been great goals against us, but there have been deflections. But yeah, is Town's luck going to come their way at some stage? Because I think every team has it.
Who knows, Ross?
Yeah,
that's the thing with luck. You never know. It could get worse. Who knows? No one's in control of that. But Kieran McKenna will tell you that all they can do is control what they can control, and they'll be working tirelessly to close those fine margins. If you do the right things, you can put yourself in better positions, which ultimately might lead to more luck, but it's not really luck by that point because you've put yourself in the right place. So we'll do what we can do. We'll control what we can control, Ross, and then hopefully everything else looks after itself from there.
Indeed. Enjoy the ride, boys. Enjoy the ride, Town fans. And let's segue into Cameron Humphreys signing a new long-term deal at the club. Stu, dropped on Friday night. Cameron Humphreys is here to stay for another 3.5 years.
Yeah, he'd only penned a new 3-year contract, I think, back in the summer. So this is reward for what he's done this season. Wouldn't have expected to have played as much as he had, but he had that little window of opportunity with Lee Evans injured and Dominic Ball and Kamara, long-term injuries as well. And taking his chance, hasn't he? He's still young, still raw. Some things that will obviously improve over time, but we can see he's got the base qualities, both in terms of technical ability, mental ability, to go a long way in this game. So rich reward for him to sign a new contract. Nice to see Ipswich being proactive on the contract front. For years we talked about Ipswich sort of sleeping at the wheel and letting situations get too late in the day, but they're in a position where they've got a bit of financial muscle that they can be proactive and sort those things out, like they did with Wolfenden, like they did with Burns last summer. So yeah, for all the short-term chat we're having about this season, it's easy to forget that the long-term picture is the medium and long-term picture is also looking very good for this club.
You pleased with that, Andy? Another 3.5 years of Cameron Humphreys?
Yeah, I am pleased. I am pleased with that. He'll be hopefully the hope's got to be that he can keep growing, keep improving, and he can move through some levels of this game with Ipswich rather than sort of waiting for him to go elsewhere to do it. But yeah, that's undoubtedly good news.
I like the video, by the way, because he's been at the club for so long, and video of him in Ipswich Town kits from very young, and just it's a little bit emotional. I think it gave a lot of people goosebumps because you always like one of your own boyhood fan and everything like that. But yeah, it's great. It's great to see him sign a new contract. Right then, boys.
Sorry, in the vein of kind of people that have had long associations with Ipswich, it really is. I don't know why this fascinated me at the weekend, but Richard, during the halftime bit where Marcus Stuart was talking, Richard Keogh was kind of stopped his warm up and just stood and watched it. And that, like, not only did Richard Keogh, was he kind of a ball boy at Ipswich during that era, kind of when maybe a little bit after when Marcus was here playing, but they played together. Marcus Stuart is 50, and Richard Keogh is a current Ipswich Town first team player. They played together at Bristol City, and I don't know why I just found that absolutely fascinating. I don't know why it's not even that they're not even that much different in terms of age. They're only 14 years different in terms of age, but that just interested me, and I thought I'd just brain fart that out onto the podcast for everybody. There you go. Enjoy. Use it as you wish.
I like that. So actually, it segues nicely into our final little thing because Manu's also 36 years old, and of course got connection with the town. Cole Skuse scored his first goal in 1,946 days. Of course, he's not a goal scorer, Cole Skuse, but he scored the winning goal for Colchester on the weekend. And Stu, 2 goals at Town in his whole Town career in 200 plus games, and he doesn't score much, but another goal for him.
He seems to have been very popular at Colchester, just judging by social media and looking from the outside in. Not all of them have. Not all of the ex-Ipswich players, I think, have set the world alight there so far. But Cole Skuse is getting that same sort of warmth and love that not over the top, but just appreciated. And Andy texted me on Saturday night to say he'd scored, and I just immediately assumed it would be the Cardiff goal again. I just assumed that you wait all that time and then he does that. I watched it back. Yeah. The goalkeeper's had a bit of a mare there. It's sort of it swerves a little bit in the air, but it's a goalkeeper error, isn't it? But good for you, Cole.
Yeah, it's good. So I know some Town fans, we're talking about former players, but Cole Scouse never scores goals, and when he does score, it's you got to mention it, haven't you? But yeah, there we go. I think that's it then, boys. It's been a one hell of a podcast. But as always, any other business, Andy? Anything else you want to mention, my friend?
I'd like to hear more about how you can sort out your Google ads and all of that kind of stuff. What does that mean?
Well, go on, Ginger Pickle. Yeah, if you want to help with your Google ads, get on top of Google, sell them more products, or with your website remarketing, contact Ginger Pickle. Go on their website, and they'll help you out. So, yeah, that's all I know. Anyway, I'm not very good with that.
Nobody knows what it means, but it's provocative.
Yes. Stu, have you got any
people
other business?
going?
No other business. No, we'll talk about Oxford later in the week, won't we? But that's after 3 draws. Are we getting towards must-win territory? But crikey, if they go 4 games without a win, that wouldn't be great, would it? So it's just put every one of these games is just putting a little bit more pressure on the next one. But really looking forward to it. I think. I don't think we should fall into the trap of thinking, they'll beat Oxford automatically because we beat them 3-0 at Portman Road on Boxing Day. They've got some good players in that team. They're not to be underestimated, certainly away from home. So, like all of the games now, I'm just looking forward to each and every game. It's just great that there's something riding on every Ipswich match on at the moment, because that wasn't the case for so long with this football club. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that and try to enjoy this the best we can.
Indeed. Of course, we're sponsored by Manscaped. Use the code KOA to get 20% off and free delivery. But one more thing we're going to mention, actually, Andy, as always, as a fan favourite on this podcast, the shirt behind you. Is it finaled?
Yeah, and that's the end of that.
But no, let's talk about it for the viewers. If you're, of course, listening on audio, you can't see it, but tell us that's the number. I like it. It's nice. It's very clean and simple, but I think it does the job.
Yep, it's a final shirt from 2004. I will not be wearing it because it's made by
Kappa. Have you ID'd that, Ross? Good work.
We've had an hour.
Sponsor, isn't it?
No, it's not the sponsor. It's because we've had an hour of me looking at it while you guys talk. I'm like trying to think, what's that logo? Well, it looks finaled. So yeah,
you're right. Very, very, very clean and simple. There's a funny story behind this shirt as well. If
I'll be the judge of that.
It's almost as good as your story about Massimo the other day, Ross.
Yeah.
It's not actually that funny. Ordered it from a bloke in Hungary off of eBay. Thought it got lost in the post. Ordered it in October. Thought it got lost in the post. Got a refund on it because it was lost in the post, and it turned up 3 days ago. So it was free. How funny was that, everyone?
I wonder who got the power pack.
That was Andy's Funny Stories. Brought to you in association with Ginger Pickle.
And Manscaped. Use 20% off. No, just Ginger Pickle, because Google and all that, because that's how you've got the shirts. Googled it and stuff, and Google Ads, all that sort of stuff.
No other business.
No other business. Okay, also, I want to shout out, of course, listen to Track the Girls Talk later on in the week. Of course, the boys will be back for the main pod on Thursday to look ahead to Oxford. Hope you've enjoyed me trying to host this podcast. I'm sure normal service will resume with good old Heathy later in the week. But thanks again for watching Kings of Anglia. Bye-bye for now.